Hello everyone, this is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. It is August of 2019. I wanted to do a little commentary and review of an interesting article that came out in the New York Times called "The Day Jeffrey Epstein Told Me He Had Dirt on Powerful People." For some reason, the usual suspects who have been covering this Epstein thing over and over have not talked about this article very much lately. The only place that I've actually heard any commentary at all was on Hannity's show, and that was just a brief overview of it. But first, I'd like to give a little update on the show and what's been going on. I've taken off most of the summer to just invest my time with my family, because that's the most important thing. You know, anything short of a nuclear war or meteor coming in or something like that, I just thought that it was best to sort of avoid some of this stuff for a while. Plus, I have been working on a documentary that seems to be a massive project, much more than I expected when I first started. I have major technical limitations as well. I have a 10-year-old computer. I don't quite have the software that I would like to have in order to make it, so it's not going to be as visually stunning, I guess, as some of the other stuff that you see people put out, but hopefully I can cover the information well. That's the real thing that I want to accomplish with it, is sort of provide an overall narrative structure that accurately represents what took place in the Franklin scandal, or the Franklin cover-up as it is variously known. I can't really give any time estimate as to when that will be finished. I would like to finish it maybe September or October or something like that, but there's a number of contacts that I have to make in order to get permission to use certain material, anything that goes above, say, fair use, or anything that isn't within the public domain and so on. I need to at least make attempts to get permission to use that material. I'm not looking to profit on it in any way, nothing like that. There's no monetary gain in it for me. It's not going to be a commercial project at all. It's simply for basically teaching, commentary, criticism, scholarship, review, that sort of thing. So most of it should fit within fair use, I would believe. So anyway, let's jump into this article here written by James B. Stewart. Of course, he puts the B there so you won't confuse him with Jimmy Stewart, the deceased actor. So he recounts a visit that he had with Epstein about a year ago in his massive Manhattan mansion, which he says from the outside looks a little bit more like a museum than an actual home. Now he points out here early on, it says, Mr. Epstein made no secret of his own scandalous past. He pleaded guilty to state charges of soliciting prostitution from underage girls and was a registered sex offender. Of course, he was registered only in certain states, and other states where he owned property, he was not forced to register as a sex offender. We have some problems with language here as we see prostitution from underage girls. I think he was charged with a 16-year-old, whereas one of the victims was about 14 years of age. And also girls underage cannot agree to prostitution, so it is always of necessity, by definition, rape. But also we have this very disturbing line here. It says, at the same time, he seemed unapologetic. See, he doesn't really care that he rapes young girls. Even with a New York Times reporter present, he doesn't care. But he says because of this, it has offered him the opportunity to gather all kinds of very interesting information on other people. Now, it doesn't say so in here, but I would imagine he squirreled away a lot of this information somewhere, recorded maybe on a audio disc, or he has written it down in something, but I bet this information is still somewhere available. It has a lot of stuff here on Elon Musk. I'm not particularly interested in that. I don't trust Elon Musk at all. Just so you know, anyone who's working on the artificial intelligence stuff, I do not think is a trustworthy person. It says here that this home in Manhattan could be the largest single-family home in Manhattan, which is quite impressive since some of the most expensive real estate in the entire world is located in Manhattan. And he seemed to have a very young Eastern European lady who may have at best been late teens or 20 years old when she answered the door. So he still continues his disturbing proclivity for very young ladies. It talks here about his undeniable charisma, which most people like this do tend to have. If you go back to the Franklin case, which I'll cover in the documentary that I'm working on, you'll find out that same thing was true of one Lawrence E. King Jr. or Larry King. He was a very charismatic figure, and he had basically enmeshed himself within the entire power nexus within the state of Nebraska, and he had made connections from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and up to the White House itself, literally inside the White House. Here we see that Epstein is quite proud of his association with the very abusive Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. Salman, of course, has been accused and very likely did beat his own wife. And Saudi Arabia is one of the worst places in the world for human trafficking and human sex trafficking. There are sex slaves regularly kept by all of the Crown Prince's family and, of course, all of the other wealthy oil magnates there. They literally maintain harems, just like you hear about Islamic culture 1,000 years ago. But here we get to another interesting point. It says, behind him was a table covered with more photographs. I noticed one of Mr. Epstein with former President Bill Clinton, of course, multi-time accused rapist and sicko, and another of him with director Woody Allen, also accused of pedophilic rape. And here we get to the very disturbing part that actually links into a lot of the episodes that I've been working on with my show lately. It says, he was more at ease discussing his interest in young women. He said that criminalizing sex with teenage girls was a cultural aberration and that at times in history it was perfectly acceptable. See, so he thinks here that morality is circumscribed by what law says and not the other way around. And this is one of the things that links together all of these people who have created this witch hunt narrative and the satanic panic mythos is almost all of them to a person actively advocate the idea that, first of all, they go on the Keynesian notion that humans are sexual from birth, which is, of course, not true at all. This is Kinsey's perverse way of distorting human sexuality. You can watch my video on that about the transmogrification of human sexuality and how that all comes from Kinsey and all of his lies, and what a disturbed pedophile sexual pervert he was, and he made sure that everyone who worked with him was likewise a pedophile sexual pervert. And he also worked with Nazis who raped hundreds of children, and he accepted the notes and papers, even paid people to go out and continue their abuse of small children. So Kinsey was a resolutely evil human being, which is, of course, why you see him promoted by the political left, why you see Hollywood constantly promoting him. It's why he's lavished with praise in all of the textbooks, because the K-12 education system and higher education as well, all controlled by far leftist extremists. But anyway, back to the satanic panic people and the witch hunt narrative people, almost all of those who make those sorts of arguments also simultaneously advocate for what Epstein is getting at here, which is the lowering of age of consent laws. For example, Mexico recently lowered theirs to the age of 12. Now, can you seriously imagine any 12-year-old agreeing to have sex with a 50-something-year-old man, as Epstein would be involved in here, or whatever else? It's absolutely despicable, disgusting behavior. But that's what all of these elites are interested in. It's what they're all involved in. But then he moves on to something else also interesting here as he starts to talk about the whack jobs that are in Silicon Valley. He says here that everybody seems to think that they're just a bunch of geeky workaholics who sit at the computer all day long punching out code and all this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, what he says is they are extremely hedonistic and regular users of recreational drugs. And here he's meaning like MDMA, mushrooms, lots of different hallucinogens such as LSD and LSD derivatives, which of course fry the human brain. But he also says that he witnessed prominent tech figures taking these kinds of drugs and arranging for sex as well. And Stewart points out here that Epstein stressed that he never drank or used drugs of any kind. See, these people always have these ways of, rationalizing or normalizing their own strangeness, their own weirdness, their own abusiveness of other people, So the way that he does it here is he says, well, I keep my own body clean, I keep my body pure, and all this kind of stuff, despite the fact that he is, of course, defiling the bodies of others. But get this part as well when they're talking about Tesla and Elon Musk. He says he had spoken to the Saudis about possibly investing in Tesla, but wouldn't provide any specifics or names. Well, why does he need to provide any names? He already told you of his close association above with MBS. That would be the people that he's referring to. That's quite obvious, I think. And of course, here it goes on to talk about Musk and Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell has popped her head in with all kinds of celebrities. All of these people wanted to associate with her. up until recently, where she has seemingly disappeared. But overall, I just thought this was a kind of interesting article, as it gives just a little bit of insight into how his mind worked. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is that this interviewer, this reporter from the New York Times, never actually moved to ask Epstein any introspective questions. For example, if this were me and he made this mention about underage sex with children and how it had been fine historically in certain times and places and all this kind of stuff. This is another thing that you'll see these kinds of people do, is they always get into relativism. They like to relativize the situation. That way it sort of takes the other person off their footing for a moment, whereas they're like, hey, this is an absolute wrong thing. And then they're like, oh, no, it was okay in other times and places. So then people are like, oh, well, maybe he has a good point there. But why do they not ask him an introspective follow-up question like, well, did something happen to you, Mr. Epstein, maybe when you were younger? Did someone touch you inappropriately or something like that? I mean, when did you first begin to have your own sexual experiences? I mean, were you 6, 7, 8 years old? Or, who did this to you? Did something happen? Not that this excuses anything he did, but just to sort of make him take a step back for a second and say, maybe it was wrong what I did, because when it happened to me, it was wrong as well. So anyway, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there. Please be sure, if you enjoyed this video, to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.